This is your one and only 𝐵𝐸☆𝐸 with your daily dose of video goodness, and welcome back to another informational Valheim video. Today we're going to talk about the best weapon slash best DPS weapon, kind of a combo thing because of the way damage in this game works. Let's get to it. All right, so one of the biggest issues with a DPS in this game is we have things that have specific weaknesses to different weapons, and we have things that have resistances to different weapons, and on top of that, the damage isn't always a set amount. You can see there 50.3, 51.6, 52.5. So the damage that comes off your weapon varies a pretty decent amount. Another issue that I had to clear up was I had to make sure that everything scaled the same with our level, because damage scales based on whatever level you're at. I have everything maxed out here but bows. So bows are at 61. If we take a look here at this iron sword, you can see the iron sword does 47 to 55 damage. That's the yellow numbers there. The orange number there is the max damage that this thing can do. So because our skill is maxed out, we're able to actually hit that max damage of 55. However, if we take a look at the bows, our yellow numbers are 26 to 38, but the bow has the capability of doing 42. We're not level 100 in bows, so therefore we can't hit that max damage of 42. So I needed to make sure that when I was testing DPS, if a specific weapon had the highest DPS at level 0, that it also had the highest DPS at level 100. And it does. So that tells me that the damage scales pretty linear. So once I confirmed that, I started testing all of the weapons. Now, in my initial testing, I did a sample size of 20 of each of them, and then I averaged them together. But seeing as that the numbers didn't vary like a crazy amount, they only vary just a little bit here and there. So for example, the axe, the first couple of numbers was 89.4, 92.5, 94.1, 96.5. So you can see there's just a little bit of variation there. Then the next one goes to 90.6. So it doesn't jump like a crazy amount. So I didn't think we needed a huge sample size. So then when I started to do the full testing, I just did a sample size of 10 and then averaged those together. I chose iron to use for my testing because iron has like the most consecutive weapons in it. So this, I chose this because there isn't an iron dagger option. So I chose the abyssal razor because it seems like it's in the level with iron, because you have the copper, which should be around your bronze stuff. So then the next stage would be the abyssal and then the black metal, but its damage isn't anywhere around silver, so I feel like its damage is more around iron level, so I used that as my iron stand-in for the daggers. As far as everything else, we have an iron version of it, but then we also have the outlier weapons. So we have stuff like the porcupine, Frostner, the battle axe, the iron sledge, and then we'll talk about bows in a minute, and we'll get to the iron sledge in a minute too. So I started with all of the iron stuff here that you see in this top row. I went through, I attacked this guy over here with each of them 10 times. I set up a macro so that I was sure that I was attacking at max speed and doing the same thing every time and could control as many variables as possible. I will note that a lot of these vary in attack speed a lot, so using the macro allowed me to see actually how much they vary, because I had to adjust it from weapon to weapon to make sure that I get 6 hits per, because I used a sample of 6 for each time I recorded the numbers. So if you set your DPS debug option, so for that you just type DPS debug and hit enter, and you can see there it sets DPS to true. So once you do that, once you hit stuff, you can see it starts recording the DPS up top there as you're hitting. So I would just do that, attack 6 times, record the number. So when looking at all these weapons and you look at their damage values, you can see that this one has the highest damage out of all of these here. Its max damage is 65 compared to the rest of these, which is 47.55, 47.55, 47.55, once again 47.55, and then this one is really low because it has that bonus of 10 times. So if you actually get the bonus, you can do upwards of 120 damage in one hit. But something to note is when you're doing the combo, they all hit 4 higher when you're doing the full set of combo. So we'll grab these here because I want to show you something, the difference between these and the spear. The spear doesn't have a combo. So if we use this, 1, 2, and then 3, you can see on that last one we hit for 116. Same thing with the sword. If we do the sword, you can see on that last one we hit for 94. We can do it again, 96. But the spear doesn't have a combo. The spear just jabby, 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 jab, jab, jab like that, and doesn't do that bonus damage. Even the dagger has a combo here. If you take a look, you can see we do 46 on that last one, 42. So the dagger is fast, but the problem with the dagger is, and the reason its DPS is so low, is because its damage is so low. While this one has high damage, it attacks so slow, it just ends up dropping off really bad. And then the spear drops off really bad because it doesn't have that additional boost on the 3rd hit to help kick its DPS up a little higher. Anyway, after testing all of these, I moved on to testing the outliers. So the Iron Sledge is terrible. It's just terrible. I stopped testing it after 3 rounds because it's so bad. It's not a weapon that you're going to use for high DPS. It has its uses. You're going to use it for that, and that's what you're going to use it for. Same thing with the bow. It's not something you're going to use for high DPS. You have to get a full draw on the thing to do any kind of decent damage, and that full draw takes a while, and especially unless you're set at 100 skill, even then there's a long lag between them, and it's just not something you're going to use for high DPS. The battle axe was actually a pretty decent contender and came in almost tied with the mace, so which is interesting at 103. The mace was at 103.01 and the battle axe was at 103.9, but once again, sample size of 10, so I mean those little points of numbers, well, you might as well just say they both came in at 103. The one thing with the battle axe is it has a really long wind up, but then after that, the 2 attacks after that are super fast. So you just swipe really quick. So it's got a long wind up, but then it makes up for that time in its next 2 attacks in the combo. And on that last one, you can see we get a nice big boost of damage there. So then I went on to test the Porcupine and Frostner. Now, the Porcupine does really good damage. If you take a look here, we do a set of 6, 166. So it averaged out with my testing at 178. Really good damage. But then once again, we already know from the initial testing that the maces are one of your highest DPS weapons. They're crazy high. Frostner was hard to test because I couldn't test it on this guy, and you taking into account the damage over time is something that should be counted on, but I wanted to know what just its base DPS would look like if we didn't have the damage over time. So I tested it on the Elder. I just spawned in an Elder and I was in ghost mode. I made sure I hit him a few times so that I don't think you can surprise the bosses, but just in case, I hit him a few times to loosen him up a little bit. And then I proceeded to do the same test I've been doing on everything else, 6 hits, and the Frostner come in at 92 damage. That puts it on par with the axe and the spear. So the axe was 92 and the spear was 89. So it's a silver weapon, but its DPS without the burn damage is on par with iron tier axe and spear. Now, if you are attacking something that actually burns for the silver damage, obviously you're going to boost that DPS much higher. Which I know I'm going to get a ton of people down there in the comments telling me, oh, its DPS is so good, it's so good. Yeah, if you're hitting something that the silver actually works on. So knowing that this does damage over time, I felt that it would be wrong not to take into account the fact that it does do damage over time and see how useful it was. So I set up a series of additional tests where I timed side by side killing different things, because that's the only way to really see how damage over time affects the overall damage of the weapon, is to compare it in a side-by-side frame-by-frame comparison to see which thing kills something the fastest. So I took the Porcupine because we already knew its DPS is absolutely insane. I had to find its counterpart sword-wise because we know that swords have the highest DPS so far. So I took the black metal sword and then compared these two to Hrosnr. So the initial test I did was using a blob. I spawned a blob at level 3 and I attacked it with each of the weapons. Porcupine come in first. Obviously it's going to come in first, followed by Hrosnr. Obviously it's going to come in second by Hrosnr because both of these are clubs and the blob is weak to clubs. And then followed up with the black metal sword. Next I tested it on a skeleton. On the skeleton, black metal sword crushed it. And then Porcupine and Hrosnr pretty much tied. Then I tested on a Draugr. The black metal sword and the Porcupine crushed it on the Draugr, and then it was followed by Hrosnr. So I also tested these 3 weapons on a boss, but before we get to the outcome of testing it on a boss, I want to talk about why I tested it on the things that I tested it on there initially. So for the blob, I knew that the slash damage that the black metal sword does on the blob would be gray. I knew that both of these it was weak to because they both do blunt damage, and I wanted to see how they compared both doing blunt damage. On the skeleton, I knew that it was also weak to blunt damage, but I also knew that the slash damage was normal. On the Draugr, all of these are normal damage. It doesn't matter, they're all normal, but I knew that it was also affected by the damage over time from Hrosnr. Now, to put all of these to the real test, I put them against 𝐵𝐴𝐽, the final boss. And for that one, it was solidly clear, black metal sword. Black metal sword ripped through that boss like he was freaking butter. Then it was followed by Hrosnr, and then followed by Porcupine. Porcupine actually did terrible on that boss, and I have a feeling that that was due to the fact that Hrosnr deals that damage over time, and as we're just sitting there constantly wailing on him, he's got that silver damage just building up, and it's making up for the damage it's filling those gaps in between our attack, where Porcupine doesn't do that. The black metal sword crushed it even though that the Hrosnr was doing damage over time because the black metal sword just does so much freaking damage. It just eats everything. It doesn't matter what it is, unless it's resistant to whatever you're attacking, or unless whatever you're attacking is resistant to slash damage, your best bet is to use the black metal sword. And as you can see on the screen right now, I'm letting this play out real time because I want you to see how long it actually took to bring him down with each of these weapons. So I feel confident in saying that the 2 strongest weapons in this game, and the only 2 weapons that you need, are the black metal sword and the Porcupine. So as you're playing the game and playing through the different stages of it, you should be training swords and you should be training clubs so that you can eventually get to the point where you're using these 2 weapons. Now I know what you're thinking. You're like, but Firespark, Hrosnr does damage over time. What about all that damage over time that I'm doing on things? It's so strong and it slows things down. You don't need to slow things down if you're killing it faster than it can do anything. What do you need to slow something down for if you're doing one combo and the thing is dying? If you kill it fast enough, you don't need any other utility. If you want a silver weapon, your best bet is to go for the silver sword, which does 75 base slash damage if you're maxed out 64 to 75 compared to Hrosnr, which only does 20 spirit damage. So if you take a look at Hrosnr's blunt and frost damage, it's 35 and 40. 75 damage if both of those hit for their max amounts, but its spirit damage is only 20. If we take a look at the silver sword, 75, 30. So the silver sword naturally has higher base damage than Hrosnr, and if you're attacking something that is affected by silver, you're going to get that damage over time. Use an iron mace until you can make 𝐿𝐴𝐴, then make 𝐿𝐴𝐴 and make the Porcupine, and skip Hrosnr altogether. The other thing is, for Hrosnr, you need Ymir flesh, so you also have to find your trader or go to another world where you know where a trader is, or get a hold of a trader. So your best bet is to just use swords and whatever mace you have at whatever level you're at until you get to the point where you're crafting black metal stuff and you have 𝐿𝐴𝐴 so that you can make the Porcupine, because Porcupine takes 𝐿𝐴𝐴. So you need 𝐿𝐴𝐴, you need needles, you need iron, and you need fine wood. It's actually really cheap. And then once you get enough black metal, make a black metal sword. On top of that, these two weapons, the porcupine and the black metal sword, will cover all of your different damage types. So no matter what you're fighting, you're always putting out the maximum amount of damage. Okay, well, I hope you found this video informational and helpful, and I hope it kind of puts some of the myths and all that other stuff. I know I'm going to get a bunch of people down there in the comments still arguing that Frostner is the best. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. It's not, but okay. Yeah, so if you found it helpful and informational, all of that good stuff, consider hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell and the like button and all the stuff. Just press all the buttons down there except the down button, the thumbs down button. Don't hit that button unless you really hated it. If you really hated it, I guess. All right, that is going to wrap it up for this episode. If you like what you saw, consider hitting that sub button. I want to give a big thank you to my patrons for making this episode possible. Y'all are absolutely amazing people. If you would like to join my Elite Crew Patreon supporters, please check out the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you're shy, you don't like to comment, just hit that thumbs up button and share your support. Until next time, thanks for watching.